musician keeps prices down far more effectively. Comrade Karanja, His Excellency says you are unbalanced.
I'm a man in search of man. I was never in search of God.
My guest tonight is Pandit Ravi Shankar. Pandit Ravi Shankar is India's preeminent musician, but all the world's his stage. Panditji, you have experimented, you have worked with fusion, you have worked with dance dramas, you've played a number of instruments, but you have retained your interest and commitment to the classical, purity of Indian classical music. You're 75 years old. What satisfactions and joys has music given you?
Well, the maximum joy naturally, and as you said, in different ways, not only playing my sitar, which is the main thing, of course, the highest joy, but next to that I have been very happy by creating things that I have always felt like something different, whether in form of orchestration or smaller groups or music for films or whatever. That has given me a lot of happiness, yes.
You know, your music, you have this commitment to the purity of the classical traditions despite the innovations that you do. And yet it has a feel of being contemporary, modern, that modern audiences are able to relate to it. What do you think brings this about? How does this happen? Is it a conscious process?
No. You see, I have been lucky in having my training from Baba Alauddin Khan and the training of the Binkar Gharana, Sainya Binkar Gharana. So it's the very pure orthodox style. But as our music is, the classical music that is, it has never stood still. In the hands of creative people, it has always added and being enriched. You see, we don't sing Vedic hymns or play the music of an 8th century or not for that matter of 19th century even. So within the same framework of classical base, we go on adding new ideas, not everybody, but those who are very creative. That's why music presented today by artists, in spite of having its roots for many centuries, what comes out can be also called as today's music. It doesn't become old and stale, that is, as far as performance is concerned. As far as the creative music that I have done, there I am not frightened at all to experiment. You know, whatever I feel comes spontaneously in my mind. I don't like gimmicks, you know, doing things for selling commercial purpose. And the word fusion also I don't use, because that means mixing music. What I have done always, as you might have noticed, that I have used the musicians who are non-Indians or instruments which are non-Indians. Therefore, I have always experimented with new sound, texture, tone, range, dynamics, and all that which always interested me. But the music, what I did was always based on ragas and talas, or maybe our Indian folk tunes or some popular tunes. So it is experimenting with more on sound and the total effect.
When you work with someone like Yehudi Menuhin or Zubin Mehta, how do you go about preparing for that performance? Are there sort of precise notations, or is the same spirit of?
It has to be, because they are so much used to it, you know. The things that I do with people like these people you mentioned, it has to be all written down. Of course, there can be parts where there's freedom of improvisation, which is mostly my parts, and then entry again back along with the musician or the orchestra, whichever, there has to be a cue, and that with eye contact with the conductor, that makes it easier. And when we perform together with Yehudi Menuhin, that's very easy because he reads, but he knows the parts where I improvise and come back again.
Do you write how much of the Indian element is notated?
You see, I write very slowly, therefore I'm Western notation, and read also very little. But what I do, I take help of some student or someone. After I write in our Indian notations, the solfeggio system, taking the names of the notes, and special indications for the rhythmic beats below the notes. And then this person, mostly students I have all over, who can transfer it to the Western staff notation, and that works.
How do you go about preparing for a performance of, say, Indian classical music when you're doing a sitar performance? What are the steps that you go through?
Well, it does have a lot of preparation mentally, not ritualistically, but...
Do you meditate? Do you do something special?
Well, all that I do, but it is very much introvert. There's a feeling of nervousness, feeling of expectation, wanting to do your best. And till you really start, for a minute or two, till that part, I always feel that as if it is the first time I'm playing for audience or anyone, that feeling of expectation, fear, and everything, and that all the humility to enter into world of raga. And especially, as you know, we start with what is known as alap, jor, jhala, and that part is very, as it is known in Hindi, adhyatmik, which means very spiritual. It's very introvert. It is not for gathering vahvas, but it is more where people close their eyes and go deep into almost like a meditation. And if I can feel that really while playing, then it is bound to have that effect into listeners.
To what degree do you respond to the audience's response once the alap process is over?
It's total silence, but the vibration is felt very clearly. It's only in the latter part when it becomes more playful, romantic, and then frenzy, speed, virtuosity, loud amplification and all that. That's when it is more what we call tamasic, or more for the average people to get excited, and sometimes they go so excited, start clapping in between, which is not very inspiring. But that's the other side of when you perform commercially, you have to do that also, without making it cheap or anything. But that's part of our music also, the excitement part, or the virtuosity and tayari, and that's where people can come out wah wah ah, or a little louder. But alap jor, if someone does that, it's very jarring. It breaks the whole concentration.
You mentioned that an applause in the middle is not always inspiring.
Unfortunately, it has become norm of the day. I don't understand why. It's almost like being in a stadium where one party gives a goal and there's so much excitement. The moment the tabla takes his first bout, after all the quiet, beautiful music, and people just cannot stop themselves. They can appreciate it, but they have to clap loud and break the whole spell that is being built. That's very disturbing. Or, something that we do, maybe a fast movement, something, they have to clap.
You also mentioned virtuosity, and these were examples of virtuosity that people were applauding. When does virtuosity transcend to become great music?
It is part of our music, definitely. But, we follow this whole Navarasa theory as all our art is best. Of course, in the realm of dance and drama, it is easier to portray the Navarasa, 9 rasas, 9 principal moods. There are a lot of uparasas or sub moods. But the main things that we can depict without words, you see, singers have little more advantage. They can add in the word which can depict certain moods or story or whatever theme. But we have to do only by sound, So the principal moods that we can express is Shantarasa, which is total tranquility. That's how we start, relaxing. Then it's joined with bhakti, devotion, and karuna, pathos, some sort of pain. It's that pain of either it can be transcribed as missing the lover or missing the supreme lover, trying to able to reach but not being able to reach. That pain, is the most important part of our music. And then, of course, you can depict dignity, like what is known as Veera Rasa. And Adbhuta Rasa is something wonderment. That is when you do a lot of fast, people get excited. But things is difficult to portray is like Grina or Vivatsa, which is disgusting. That is the difficult most part, I think. But Sringar Rasa becomes the main thing. Sringar Rasa, the erotic mood or romantic, is also known as Adi Rasa because it has all the moods combined within it, that framework. And that's a beautiful part of our music.
Would you say then that the capacity of a musician to feel these emotions personally and intensely?
They have to. If they don't do it, it is just, like playing without feeling. But as I said, the singers have some more advantage because they have those words which can convey certain scene or whatever feeling. But ours is entirely with inner feeling that we have to depict.
Would you say that you have to be a good human being to be a great musician?
I believe that. But I have seen a lot of people, it doesn't follow always. I have felt that there can be many musicians who are great performers and they absolutely, when you hear them, you go transformed completely. But afterwards, when you meet them, you feel not that interesting,
Is interesting a polite word for not being good human beings?
I don't like to do that. But I do believe one has to be a good human being and try one's best to be at least.
You mentioned dance and you briefly mentioned drama and you've talked about singing. In your youth, you had experimented with many forms. Certainly you used to play the sarod, you used to play the drums, you were with your brother Uday Shankarji and were interested in theatre. What is the special quality that the sitar had for you that prompted you to?
Well, I was very lucky. It was just the other way around than everyone else, for instance. You see, it has been a practice in our tradition that you start learning from your childhood, from your father or your guru, whoever, and till you are 17, 18 and fully ready when the guru says go, then you come out in the world. That has been the old tradition. And that way you see, after being just under one atmosphere and learning the whole tradition, when you face the world, it is something which is very dazzling. Sometimes it puts some people off completely, or some people can gracefully go ahead. But with me it was different, From the age of 10 I was just thrown into this situation with my brother Uday, who was a great dancer, as you know, and a superstar in those times. And it was Paris, which was our headquarters. So I was very fortunate in immediately being in the center of arts and then traveling with him all over the world, and hearing all the different types of music, from Western classical to jazz to country music and whatever was popular in those days. Seeing all the best ballets, operas, theatres, everything. So completely I had the whole thing in my mind. Then I went to Baba Alauddin, my guru.
That was when you were 18 years old. Isn't that relatively old?
Actually, I started learning from him when I was 15, because that's when he joined for 1 year in our troupe. And that 1 year really formed my whole mental attitude as well as decision, because he told me frankly that, this is not the way. You are doing too many things. You have to leave everything and come to me, then only I will teach you. But within that 1 year time, he did teach me a lot and completely changed my life. And after he went away, he had contract for only 1 year. In 1936 he went away, that is back to India, and we were still touring Europe, America, all over. And it took me almost 2 years to take final decision, because I was so well known by that time as a dancer and quite successful. And being a young man, I was having such wonderful time touring with my brother in the 5-star hotels and living it up. So it was a difficult decision for me to take, but I did, because my whole thing was, wanting to go to Baba and learn in the old style. So from having seen the whole thing, I went back to the old style, which was very strange. It took me a few months to get, used to that. But believe me, I think that did wonderful thing for my life. And when I came out again, it was easier for me to face the world without any, I knew it all by that time, the public, the way to perform, because that was my earlier training.
What did living it up in Paris at the age of 15 involve?
Why go into details? But, it was a natural thing in those days. Everything was so much open and innocent in a way, There were not all these dogmas of today and fear of AIDS and things like that. So, it was easier to face the life as it came. But as I said, it was very much better when I went back, for instance, many years later to Europe and America. I knew their mind, I knew what are the things that bugs them in our music, for instance. It's very natural.
What bugs them about our music?
You see, we have this thing that longer is better. We have to perform, show off that I can perform 1 hour, 2 hour Darwari Kannada or whatever, and then only people think you are very great. That has been the practice and tradition. But I knew that that's what makes them climb the wall. That's what it did in the past. I saw them, I heard them pass these remarks, Therefore, within the framework of the concert time of say 2 hours or 2.5 hours, I tried to give them as much as possible the variety, instead of making each thing very long, maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes piece, and give them an idea of all the styles, Dhrupad Dhamar, Alap, Numtum, Jod, and Khyal, then Tumri, then even folk tunes. So all that, worked very well, and I used to explain also.
You were able to, of course, you performed at
communicate, I could, that was easier.
You performed at Woodstock, and you were a major hero
Half a million people.
For the people of that generation. Did you consider going back to Woodstock too?
Never, because that was the end of the whole pop scene. Monterey was almost like the beginning, Monterey pop. It was beautiful. Though there was a lot of drug, which I always condemned and was against. But still, there was that love and peace which these kids were trying to, and there was innocence also. But by the time Woodstock happened, it was all kide lag gaye usme. And it was like a big picnic party, as I said, and everybody has in the mud, like hamare bhains log yahan, as you know, the buffaloes in the mud, the way they enjoy. To me, it seemed like that, and the whole thing was, they were having fun in every way, but music was just an incidental background thing.
You have continued an association with some of the people of the Woodstock generation, with George Harrison. What is your collaboration with him now?
Well, now it's a different story, believe me. I mean, all those kids who were young, with long beard, long hair and beads and all that, and always showing these signs and being stoned, they are still there. Not all maybe, but most of them are still there, and they have changed. They are not into drugs anymore, and they are much more sober, and they know much more about Indian music and Indian everything, because they have gone through phase you know, and they are wonderful.
You've started, in a sense, about 7 years ago, or 5 years ago, when you came back to India with your wife Sukanya and your daughter, another phase of contact with India, and I think that we saw more of you in India. How important was your wedding and return to India and the 5 years that you spent here almost continuously?
Believe me, it has been such a wonderful change for my life. It has given me new life, new inspiration, and having Sukanya and my daughter Anushka, who is very, very talented. I'm working on her on sitar. She plays the piano also, Western music at the same time. I have a lot of hopes. It gives me a lot of desire to live and, you know, complete as much as I can, pass down whatever little I have to her.
You know, Zakir Hussain has quoted you as saying that the advice you gave him was to keep going back to India and to go back to the roots of Indian music. What does India mean to you beyond being the source of your inspiration and the music that you play?
It means everything to me, but shall I tell you one thing without being misunderstood? I always, it was same thing with my brother Uday, somehow. And this happens to most people when they live outside India for a long time. You see, they start reading, they start knowing more about the ancient India, all our great qualities that we have, which includes yoga, religion, spiritual things, and all the artistic development that we had. And somehow I have been into the same thing, you know. So it is not very much the India today that appeals to me. In fact, it shocks more, it hurts more. But you know, all these nice things which is related to my music are things which are ancient things, which I find in old temples, which in old elderly people who are steeped in Sanskrit and Shastras and so many things like that, spiritual people, and it's something which attracts me much more.
What is it about India that shocks and hurts you?
Well, most of the things today, I mean, more than anything, of course, this whole pollution that we are facing today. And I find not pollution only in the atmosphere, but even pollution and corruption, all that combined into people's mind also, unfortunately. And I find this nervousness and wanting to speed and amass as much as you can in a pre-materialistic way, just like it has been happening in West for some time. But they have somehow managed to adjust it, you know. They do it a little more gracefully because they have been doing it for a long time perhaps. But today, with all these new things happening and all these opportunities, there seems to be a frenzy which frightens me sometimes.
You were working to setting up Ravi Shankar Center of Music in Delhi. Where is the
I've been
project?
trying it for a long time, in fact, and again, this is case of bureaucracy in our government, which unfortunately has not been possible for me to do it. The land is already allotted, we have paid for it and everything, but little things come, all these chota people, you know, in between, they are creating so many hurdles that we have not been able to start.
You had two very profound teachers in your brother Udayji and in Baba Alauddin Khan.
Exactly.
What are the qualities of a great teacher that you now aspire for yourself and the students that you have?
That's not for me to say, that someone else should
What do you aspire to?
Huh?
What do you aspire to being as a teacher?
Well, as I said, I still like to teach some deserving students who are really very dedicated and talented, and namely my daughter is one of them. I like to concertize, but not so much like before, but I still love to concertize in Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, main place, Pune, and maybe New York, Los Angeles, London, a few places like that. And then more than anything I like to do is make new album CDs or whatever, CD-ROMs and stage productions. You know, we are bringing Ghanshyam next year, 96. They have invited us to bring Ghanshyam, the one I did 2 years ago. So those are the things which keep me going.
Panditji, do you have any unfulfilled dreams?
So many.
Tell us the two most significant ones for you.
No, like it comes back again to what I was saying. I always wanted to do something which will stay, you know, like some ballets, opera, through which you can give something to the people. And those are still to be done.
When you say something will stay, do you fear mortality?
Well, I'm human enough to do that, but somehow I don't fear death. As I said the other day, it has been knocking my door this last few years, and I have not been afraid of it, excepting that I wanted to just finish my few duties which I feel very important. Not fear of dying, no. And that is all I want.
Are some of these duties in the public domain?
Ultimately it is. If I prepare one or two students, you know, who can carry on where I have left from, you know, and go further, that will be one of the biggest thing that I can do. Or keep few productions like this which has some moral and something really wonderful, some stories of past but which will be immortal really. These are the things I would like to do.
Panditji, thank you very much and good luck.
That has given me a lot of happiness, yes.
You know, your music, you have this commitment to the purity of the classical traditions despite the innovations that you do. And yet it has a feel of being contemporary, modern, that modern audiences are able to relate to it. What do you think brings this about? How does this happen? Is it a conscious process?
No. You see, I have been lucky in having my training from Baba Alauddin Khan and the training of the Binkar Gharana, Sainya Binkar Gharana.
You're 75 years old. What satisfactions and joys has music given you?
Well, the maximum joy naturally, and as you said, in different ways, not only playing my sitar, which is the main thing of course, the highest joy, but next to that I have been very happy by creating things that I have always felt like something different, whether in form of orchestration or smaller groups or music for films or whatever.
Competition keeps prices down far more effectively.
Comrade Karanja, His Excellency says you are unbalanced.
So it's the very pure orthodox style, but as our music is, the classical music that is, it has never stood still. In the hands of creative people, it has always added and being enriched. You see, we don't sing Vedic hymns or play the music of an 8th century, or not for that matter of 19th century even. So within the same framework of classical base, we go on adding.
I'm a man in search of man. I was never in search of God.
My guest tonight is Pandit Ravi Shankar. Pandit Ravi Shankar is India's preeminent musician, but all the world's his stage. Pandit ji, you have experimented, you have worked with fusion, you have worked with dance dramas, you played a number of instruments, but you have retained your interest and commitment to the classical, purity of Indian classical music.